They paid $40,000 to be alone. I need you to understand that sentence because it is the whole story, and it took me a long time to be able to say it without something happening to my voice. $40,000. For a private tour of Death Valley, the very finest thing the company offers, and what all that money actually bought them more than the meals and the vehicle and the lodge, was me. The best guide in this valley, at their side every minute, watching the sky and the heat and the water and the clock so that nothing could go wrong. And on the last morning of their lives, they used all of that money and all of that access to do the one thing the whole arrangement existed to prevent. They sent me away because they had not paid $40,000 to share the moment with the hired help. They had paid it to be alone, just the two of them, in the most beautiful and most lethal place on the continent. And the desert gave them exactly what they paid for. This is one of those stories. Welcome back to Doomed Departures. What you are about to hear is a composite. The couple are invented, built from the same profile of confident, capable, successful people I've guided for years, most of whom listen. No real person is named. I'm going to call myself Gabriel, and the two of them Grant and Camille. This is a dramatization. The valley is real, the heat is real, and the specific way this place kills people who believe that paying enough should make it safe is very real. I have guided in Death Valley for a long time, and the private work, the high end of it, for the last several years. I want to tell you honestly what that money buys, because people misunderstand it, and the misunderstanding is the seed of everything that happened. When you pay what Grant and Camille paid, you are not buying a way around the desert. There is no such thing. What you are buying is a person who has spent his whole life learning this place, standing between you and it, all day, every day, making 1,000 small calls you will never even notice, so that your trip feels effortless and safe. The effortlessness is the product. The safety underneath it is the actual thing, and it is invisible, which turns out to be the problem, because a person cannot value a danger they were never allowed to feel. Think about what a trip like theirs is actually like from the inside. The temperature is never mentioned, because I have already planned the day around it. The water is always there, cold, handed to you before you knew you were thirsty. The hard part of the road is smoothed over. The timing is handled. The risks are quietly steered around hours before you would ever have met them. To the person being guided, it feels like the desert is simply being kind to them. Like this fearsome place everyone warned them about is actually gentle and manageable and a little overhyped. They never see the danger, because my entire job is to make sure they never see it. And so, without ever deciding to, they come to believe it was never really there. That is the trap I build for my own clients with my own competence, and the only thing that keeps it from being lethal is that they let me keep doing it. When they stop letting me, the desert is still exactly as deadly as it always was. They just have not felt it in days. Grant and Camille were in their late 40s, and they were, by any measure, a success. I'm not going to tell you what they did because it does not matter, and because they were more than it, but they had the kind of money that had for a very long time solved things. That is the important part, not the amount, the habit. They had spent their adult lives in a world where a problem was a thing you paid the right person to make disappear, and it had worked over and over for decades, because in their world it almost always does. A bad table becomes a good one. A closed door opens. A delay becomes a non-issue. Somewhere along the way, thousands of times, the world had taught them a lesson that was true everywhere they had ever been, which is that money is a key that fits every lock, and they had no reason to doubt it, because it had never once failed them. You cannot really blame a person for believing the thing their entire life has proven. The problem is only that they had never taken that belief anywhere. It was not true, and Death Valley is the oldest lock in the country, and it has no keyhole. They were not cruel people. They were generous, actually, and funny, and clearly still in love after a long time together, and I liked them. But they arrived carrying one belief so deep that neither of them could see it, which was that they had never once been in a situation that money could not fix. And so they did not believe, in their bones, that such a situation existed. Death Valley is that situation. It is the place where the thing that has always worked stops working, and it does not warn you that it has stopped. They had a centerpiece to the trip, the thing they had really paid for, and it was this. A private sunrise, just the two of them, alone, at a remote spot the company can reach that almost no one else ever sees. Hours down a rough road from anything, out where the valley opens up empty and enormous and there is not another human being for a very long way. It is a genuinely magnificent thing. I have taken people out there and watched the light come up and seen them cry. And it is safe, entirely safe, when it is done the way it is meant to be done, which is early and fast and with me there, and off the sand before the sun gets its full weight into the day. That is the whole design of it. Dawn and gone. Because that spot, in summer, is only survivable in the cool slice of the morning, and the window closes hard and early, and once it closes, that remoteness that makes it so special becomes the exact thing that makes it deadly. Because you are hours from help in a place with no water and no shade and no signal worth the name. And the closing of that window is not gradual, whatever it looks like. The temperature out there does not ease up on you. Once the sun clears the ridge line, it comes down with its full weight, and the ground gives it back, and the air goes from pleasant to punishing in less time than it takes to have a nice conversation about staying a bit longer. That is the thing nobody feels until it is too late. That the morning is not slowly warming, it is a trapdoor, and there is a moment, a real one, when it is fine. And a short time later, there is no version of fine anywhere in that basin, and the two moments look and feel almost identical right up until they do not. I told them all of that the night before. That is rung 1. I walked them through the morning, the early start, the short window, the plan to be back in the vehicle and moving before the heat came up. And I watched them receive it the way people like them receive logistics, which is as my job, as the boring part, as the stuff they were paying me precisely so they would not have to think about. They nodded. They were not worried. Why would they be worried? They had bought the good version of everything their whole lives, and this was the good version. And the good version does not have consequences. That is what the good version means. We drove out in the dark and we got there for the dawn, and it was perfect. It was everything they had paid for. The light came up the way it does, and they stood out on that empty ground with their arms around each other, and I stood back and let them have it, and it was, for about 20 minutes, one of the best mornings I have ever been part of. And then the sun cleared the mountains, and I started gently to move us toward leaving. And that is where it began, because they did not want to leave. And I understand why. It was beautiful, and they were happy, and they had come a very long way and paid a great deal to be exactly here, in exactly this. And the idea of cutting it short because a guide was looking at his watch felt, to them, like being shortchanged. Camille asked if they could just have a little longer, just the two of them. And I said yes to a little, because a little was still inside the window. And I have learned that you buy a person's cooperation later by giving them the small things now. But a little became a little more, and the sun kept climbing, and I made the call I am paid to make. I told them kindly but clearly that it was time, that the window was closing, that we needed to be moving. And that is rung 2, and it is where the money turned from a thing that had bought them a wonderful morning into the thing that killed them. Because Grant looked at me, still smiling, still friendly, and said the sentence. He said, "We paid for this," meaning we paid for this morning, this experience, this place, and we are not done having it, and you work for us, and we would like to stay. It was not aggressive. That is what people always get wrong about these stories. He was pleasant. But underneath the pleasantness was a thing that could not be moved, which was the certainty that because they had paid, the morning belonged to them and the length of it was theirs to decide. And my job was to make their decision comfortable, not to overrule it. And here is the thing they wanted, the thing they had really been circling the whole trip, and it came out now. They did not just want more time, they wanted to be alone, truly alone. They had loved the morning, but I had been there for it, standing back, respectful, invisible as I know how to be. And it was not enough, because the whole fantasy they had paid for was the two of them and the desert and no one else, and a guide standing 30 yards away with a radio and a med bag was, to them, a flaw in the product. So Camille asked me, warmly, to give them the place to themselves, to take the vehicle back to the shade of the ridge and wait, and let the two of them walk out a little into the openness alone for an hour, and just be there, together, the way they had imagined it when they booked this a year ago. That is rung 3, and it is the one I will carry for the rest of my life, because I said no, and my no did not hold. I told them, as plainly as I have ever told a client anything, that I could not do that. That the entire safety of this place was me being with them. That out here alone, they would be hours from help in a place with no water and no shade, and that the heat was already coming up, and that walking out into that openness by themselves, without me, was the single most dangerous thing a person could do in this valley. I told them the remoteness they loved so much was not a feature once something went wrong. It was the whole danger. Alone out here does not mean peaceful. Alone out here means unreachable. And they heard me the way they had heard everything, which is as an employee managing his own liability. As the help being cautious to cover himself, as one more person telling them the thing they had paid a fortune specifically not to be told. Camille said gently that they understood, that they would be careful, that they would just be right out there where I could see them, that they had done plenty of hiking, and that they had paid, and they wanted their moment, and they were asking me nicely to give it to them. Let me stop and ask you something, because this one is not really about a desert. When was the last time you paid for something, really paid for it, and let the paying convince you that you were owed the outcome? That the price was a kind of guarantee? That because you had held up your end, the world or the weather or the mountain was now obligated to hold up its end and give you what you came for? Tell me below, because that is the belief that walked these two out onto the sand. Not stupidity, not even arrogance exactly. Just a lifetime of the transaction working, of money buying the result, carried into the one place that has never taken a payment in its life. I could not physically stop them. I want to be honest about that, because people who have never stood where I stood do not understand it. They were adults, they were clients, they had not broken any law, and they were asking, pleasantly, for privacy on a trip they had paid for. My options were to physically restrain two paying clients, which I cannot do, or to refuse and be fired and replaced by a company that would have simply sent someone more agreeable. Or to do what I did, which was the least bad thing available and still a thing I will never forgive myself for. I gave them water. I gave them both bottles, all I could put on them. I gave Grant a radio, and I showed him the one button that mattered, and I made him repeat back to me what it was for. I made them both promise to stay in sight of the ridge, and to come in the moment I signaled, and I told them one more time, looking at each of them in turn, that the heat was already climbing and that they had far less time out there than they thought. They promised. They meant it. People always mean it. A promise made by a person who does not believe in the danger is not worth the breath it rides out on. Not because they are lying, but because they are agreeing to be careful about a thing they are certain is not real. And then I drove back to the shade to wait, and I watched them walk out into the openness alone, exactly the way they wanted, holding hands. And here is what the money had quietly done to them that they never understood. For their entire trip, water had been my job. Shade had been my job. Time had been my job. Every one of the small survival tasks that a person does for themselves in the desert had been done for them, invisibly, by me, because that is the service. So when they walked out there alone, they were not experienced desert hikers stepping out for an hour. They were two people who had been carried expertly for days, suddenly stepping outside the system that had been keeping them alive without their ever feeling it, with 2 bottles of water and no real idea of how fast that place was about to take everything they had. That is the hidden cost of being served well, and almost no one who can afford it ever sees it. When someone competent handles the dangerous parts of your life for long enough, you do not just lose the habit of handling them yourself. You lose the belief that they were ever dangerous at all. Grant and Camille had not carried their own water, watched their own clock, or read their own sky in days, because I had done all of it, invisibly, perfectly, and the smoother I made it, the less real the danger became to them. Until walking out alone into 120 degrees felt to them like a slightly more private version of a thing that had been completely safe all week. It had never been completely safe. It had been completely managed. Those are not the same word, and the difference between them is the whole distance between the vehicle and where they were found. The heat came up the way it does out there, fast and total, and the openness that had been so beautiful at dawn became a furnace with no edge to it. And they did what people do. They stayed a little longer than they meant to because it was their moment and they did not want to waste it. And a little longer in that place at that hour is not a small thing. And their water went, faster than they believed possible. Because in that dry heat, your sweat vanishes off your skin before you feel it, and your body empties out while telling you that you are fine. And somewhere out there, past the point where I could still make sense of them as two small figures against the white, they got turned around, or one of them faltered, or the heat simply reached them the way it reaches everyone who stays. And the morning they had paid so much for became the thing it had always had the power to be. I am not going to walk you through it, and I'm not going to put you out there with them, because they were two real people who loved each other, and this channel has a line I will not cross. I signaled at the time we had agreed and got nothing back. I signaled again. I got on the radio and called Grant's name, and the channel stayed silent. And I was already moving before I let myself understand why, out of the shade and into it, running toward two shapes on the open ground that were no longer standing the way people stand. I went out after them the moment my signal went unanswered, the moment the shapes on the sand stopped being right. And I will tell you that I went, and that the valley is bigger than any person's willingness, and that heat does most of what it is going to do in a window far shorter than anyone believes, and that being close by is not the same as being in time. I was close. I was being paid that very morning to be close. And it was not enough, because the thing that would have saved them was not proximity. It was them letting me stand beside them, and that was the one thing all their money had been spent to avoid. They were found together, out on the open ground, which is the only mercy in it, that they were not alone from each other at the end, only alone from help. The rulings were heat-related, both of them. There was a couple who paid a fortune for exclusivity and got it completely, out where there was no one else for miles, which is the same sentence as out where no one could reach them, told two different ways. If any of this reached you, do the small thing that carries it to the next person about to treat a price tag like a safety net. Like this video, so it finds someone before they wave off the person who knows better, and subscribe so you are here for the next one. Not for me, and not for a number on a screen. Do it so that one more successful, capable, sensible couple somewhere remembers that the expert they paid for is the thing they paid for and lets him stand beside them, and goes home with a slightly less private sunrise and a very long life to tell people about it. I have turned this one over more than any trip I have ever run, and here is where it leaves me. There is exactly one thing that $40,000 could not buy them out there, and it is the only thing that would have saved them, and it is the willingness to be helped. They could buy the access. They did. They could buy the guide, the vehicle, the water, the whole system, built by people who have watched this valley kill for 100 years. What money cannot buy is the small daily surrender of letting someone who knows more than you actually protect you, because that surrender is not a service, it is a humility. And it is the one thing a person who believes money makes them the authority can never quite bring themselves to spend. They bought the best protection in the valley, and then, at the last, could not stand to be protected, because being protected meant not being alone. And being alone was the thing they had paid the most for. And that is the cruelty I cannot get past, the shape of the whole thing. What they paid for and what killed them were the same thing. Exclusivity, privacy, the two of them and the desert and no one else. It was a beautiful thing to want. It is on every list of things people dream of before they die, to have a wild and perfect place entirely to themselves. And they could afford it, and they bought it, and the desert delivered it in full, because the desert is always willing to give you solitude. Solitude is the one thing it has in endless supply. It just does not tell you, when you ask for it, that out here another word for alone is unreachable, and another word for private is that no one will come. Everywhere else they had ever bought privacy, it had been a luxury with a floor under it. The private island still has a boat and a doctor. The private jet still has a pilot and a radio. They had bought exclusivity 100 times in their lives, and it had always come with an invisible net, because in the human world, money buys you privacy and safety at the same time, bundled so tightly that you forget they are two different things. Out here, they come unbundled. Out here, you can buy all the privacy in the world, more solitude than a person has ever owned, and there is no net under it. None. Because the desert does not staff the places it lets you be alone in. They bought the privacy. The safety was the part they sent back to the shade with me. They wanted to be alone together in Death Valley with no one else in sight and no one hovering and no help standing by. They got it. They got every bit of it, exactly as ordered, and I stood in the shade of a ridge a quarter-mile away and let them have the thing they paid for, because they told me to, because they had paid, because I could not make them let me keep them alive. Next time we leave the dry heat behind for cold water, where no amount of money buys you a thing, and the water takes the person who paid the most and the person who paid nothing at exactly the same speed, for no reason at all but the water being water. This has been Doomed Departures. Stay safe, and we will see you on the next one.